Well, we are a few minutes past the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the second of 3 stakeholder meetings we are hosting for the 17th Street Reinvestment Study. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day again to engage this important project about your neighborhood. We really look forward to a robust discussion today, similar to the one in April. I'm Zach Pietmeyer. I'm a project manager with CCDC, and I'm again joined by Dave, Angela, and Chris from Cushing Terrell, our consultants on this project, and they will help lead today's discussion. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Dave. Here's an outline for what we'll cover today. I'll give a quick recap of our last meeting, but the bulk of today's meeting will focus on stakeholder preferences related to different physical locations within the study area, as well as categories of potential change which might help spur investment in the neighborhood. So that, after all, is the purpose of this project, to find out ways which CCDC can partner with you or with our partner agencies to spur private investment in this area. So Dave will be leading the entire group through a series of questions and discussion dealing with things such as mobility, utilities, land use, zoning, and placemaking. The information we glean from this discussion will help guide the development of recommendations for specific infrastructure improvements or policy changes which can incentivize investment in this neighborhood. Then at the third and final meeting next month in June, we'll present a draft set of those recommendations to this group. As was the case with our last meeting, the goal of this meeting is really to listen and to learn from you. So we want all stakeholders to engage in the process and share their vision for either a specific property or the area as a whole. So please feel empowered to join the conversation and share your thoughts. A few housekeeping items. Similar to last time, this is a very large group and not all interested stakeholders were able to make this time work. So we're recording the meeting, and we will make sure to distribute a link and a meeting summary following this so that all stakeholders can stay up to date on the conversation. To keep things moving and to minimize interruptions, please keep your microphone on mute until you speak. And then if you wish, there is a chat function in Zoom. If you would like to ask a question or make a comment that way, please feel free to. Next slide, please. So as a refresher, we conducted our first stakeholder meeting back on April 6th. During that meeting, we provided a series of snapshots about the existing conditions within the study area. Information was shown on existing utilities, zoning, land use, streetscape condition, land utilization, some floodplain issues, and property ownership. All those things set the stage for breakout sessions or breakout discussions where stakeholders were asked to share their impressions of the study area, including barriers that they see preventing further investment. Some of the common or more important themes that we heard during that discussion are that this is a neighborhood in transition, but that it's currently a place where people drive through and not necessarily a place they drive to yet. There are a lot of opportunities for investment and redevelopment, many of which have been identified through the URD framework planning process. They were, more commonly referred to as sites susceptible to change. With the exception of maybe stormwater, utilities do not appear to pose a significant barrier to development. So not a lot of concern with utilities. Next slide, please. Some of the primary hurdles that were identified during the meeting include safety. That was really one of the biggest concerns that property owners expressed. There's no real full-time residents living in the area, and 17th Street itself, specifically being a dead-end street with very low traffic, results in very few eyes on the street, so to speak. This current zoning precludes high-density development somewhat. The land use application process and approvals do appear or are complex and lengthy. Developers feel that they can be nickeled and dimed for public improvements, which takes money and energy away from the quality of the development they're trying to build. And that housing might be a benefit to this area, and that even if it's not affordable housing, there's a sentiment that perhaps any type of housing added to this area will help the city's goal of increasing access to affordable housing. Before we go on, I'll pause here real quick to see if there's any other items folks thought of after our first meeting. that you'd like to share with a larger group, so please feel free to share now. Okay. Not a problem. We'll have plenty of opportunity to speak up during the meeting, but hearing none at the moment. I again want to express our appreciation for you joining us today, and I'll turn it over to Dave Dixon to take us through the remainder of today's presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. We've got a couple of us here that will help facilitate and ask questions, but this is a really critical piece for us to do this preferential survey with the folks on the line. So appreciate you coming, and please, by the nature of you being here, please help us and share your thoughts through this poll that we will be doing. There's actually five polls. So what we'll do is it'll pop up in the Zoom application that you're in. Hopefully you've done these before. It's pretty simple. They're multiple choice, so nothing too complicated. They're typically, some of the questions will have an other option. And if we see some people choosing the other option, we'll ask folks to explain why the other option was chosen. So our 5 polls, we have just a general overall questions, just 2 questions about the study area that get us kick started, and then we'll speak to connectivity and mobility. We'll ask you questions about certain streets. 17th Shoreline and Americana are kind of our main streets, so we'll ask a couple questions about specific to those. We'll have a couple questions on utilities, and then land uses and zoning, and finally placemaking. So it's an anonymous poll, but we really would it would be fantastic for our purposes if if you could explain some of the choices, and we'll ask some probing questions after each poll to get folks' thoughts on each of these subjects. So what we'll do is we'll start with the first poll. It's just the general poll. I'll launch it and we'll go through our questions, and then at the end we will look at the results, and it should pop up live on the screen, and so we can discuss it at that point. So I'll have our map ready, and I'm going to launch the poll right now. So the first question: what types of public improvements or actions within the study area do you feel will generate the highest level of private investment? So again, anonymous responses, but if you could choose based on your own properties or interests, that would certainly help us, but this is just in general. Some of our answers are placemaking, creating enhancing neighborhood identity, open space, parks or greenbelt improvements, utilities, infrastructure, public parking, mobility, infrastructure or services, public safety improvements, acquiring, consolidating, or disposing of public property, land use changes or zoning changes, and expedited simplified land use applications, or the process, or another option. So I'll give everybody a couple minutes here, so please go ahead and click away. Getting a couple of votes in.
I can't get the submit button to activate.
What is it saying to you?
Yeah, it's just not activated. It's just staying gray.
Huh. I'm getting some votes in, so how many folks are having issues with that? Let's see.
It's picked just 3, right?
Yeah, so yeah, you pick your I think you just click it and it goes and it records the vote. So
Oh, okay. So it's already recorded.
Chris, I think you're on mute. What do you?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah, you have to answer both questions and then it'll have submit.
Yes, there's a second question down below if you scroll down, and that is improvements to which existing corridors will have the greatest positive impact on investment to you in the study area. And that's just pick one. Top one is pick the three of your highest level of that you believe will generate the highest level of investment. Second one is pick that one discrete location. So
Dave,
I'll give it
sorry, just to clarify.
Sure.
So on question 2, you're given the choice of like individual streets there, 17th, Americana, and then Shoreline. And then with 17th and Americana, are you talking about like an intersection, or are you talking about both streets, or what's the intent there by combining them?
I believe that's, sorry.
Both streets, Sean. So
okay.
Yep.
Both those streets, yeah.
Both.
All right. Thanks all.
So which one would you pick if you were looking at trying to say the kind of the, well, without being too delicate, the area right there around Cooper Court?
I would
there's no river in Americana. Should I just say the?
I'd say oh, sorry.
17th Americana, probably.
Yeah, I would say that, and if we can record your comment at the end, then that would be valuable for us.
Okay.
Yeah, Captain Birch brings up a good point. This one doesn't have the other option, so if folks do have one that's not listed, please just share that with us and we'll record it as such.
So I got 16, 17, 18, just a couple more votes coming in. And then I'll show the results and we'll discuss them here in 1 minute. Okay. Just a couple more seconds. So anybody who hasn't voted, get your votes in and we'll end it here. Okay. So let me know when you see the results. We can talk about what we're seeing here. All right, we'll talk about number 1 first. So what types of public improvements or actions would generate the highest level of private investment? So placemaking was the winner with 63% of the vote, followed by public safety. So pretty even on those. When we say placemaking, we have in parentheses there, creating or enhancing neighborhood identity. That can be through public plazas, through public art, some sort of emphasis in the right of way. Does anybody have any thoughts on when they voted for placemaking, what that means to them and what they would like to see out of that?
I picked it because honestly, I think that right now the area has a fairly negative perception in a lot of people in the community. I'm not saying it's accurate or fair. I'm just saying that's the way it is. I think that whatever we put in there, I think that it certainly needs to have a change. And I don't know that you're going to bring what you want there without doing so. So that's what I took it. That's why I picked it.
Yep. Anyone else?
Just very generally, I meant by mine, when I pick placemaking is activation, whether that be in the form of events or, a harder, type of investment in the area, longer term investment.
It's fantastic. Yeah. So as far as also public safety came in, what is there aware to that? And is there any other background to that public safety choice that anybody wants to discuss?
Well, I just think there is a perception of the neighborhood, particularly with homeless shelters there and maybe some other reasons, but there's probably a perception there that's not a very safe area for people either to invest or people to want to go to for whatever reason. That's one of the reasons I chose it.
And it's funny because I didn't pick public safety, which I know seems kind of weird. I picked placemaking. I think that when the area turns over and the investment, because it's the shelters are going to go, and I think some of that will resolve itself when it does that. And if you look at crime mapping, it's really, really hot in that area right now because of the shelters and some of the things that go along with them. I think all that'll turn over. And of course, we most recently put our substation right there in that general area. I think that will clean itself up, quite frankly, as you go through the project.
Mhm. Great. So utility infrastructure, basically it looks like infrastructure did not receive as many votes. So those that placemaking and that safety, those seem to be the targets of investment from this group. So that's great. Thank you.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah, Dave, I would just, I'd make one comment off of what Paul says, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but every one of these, in my opinion, would be phenomenal areas to look at and kind of invest in and take some time. But it's kind of the chicken and the egg, right? So city's got to make some decisions. This group, not just this group, but businesses and investors have to make decisions and start working on getting land use changes and zoning better, figuring out some of those public properties. You do all that stuff, money starts coming in. Then the placemaking, the open space, I'm just of the opinion that those are going to be part of the process of getting development rights and doing different things. So I kind of a little confused, Dave, about the process, because some of this stuff I think might come before the other stuff in this list. So it's like a chicken and egg, the way I look at it.
Sure. No, I understood. And this, I think this is stepwise in the direction that we need to move with the planning effort, at least. So it is difficult, obviously, but yeah. So the sentiment from your side is the placemaking will occur as land use and investment occurs. So I understand your point of view. And maybe some of the later questions as we get through this, we start breaking things down into smaller areas and get there a little bit deeper dive into areas and things. So we'll continue to kind of go through these, and it might make more sense as we go on. So as far as putting attention, resource allocation, anything or improvements to existing corridors, in your opinion, what would have the greatest positive impact and investment in the study area? So 17th and Americana. So both of those east-west roads, and we're talking about streetscaping and all these things. We actually do have a couple questions on what that means here in a second, but also Americana and 16th. So it kind of sounds like everything could use some attention or some improvements. Is there anything specific anybody has on their minds as far as a project that when they chose any of these options is something that there's an interest in participating or partnering in? Anything on Americana in particular?
Well, I don't know if you can structure anything from a public access standpoint to limit the panhandling that takes place right there at River and Americana, but to me, that's a significant issue, both in terms of the image of the area and of the folks that we see who panhandle and then walk down the street and get a quick hit. So if that could happen, that would be better.
Great, thank you.
I think the lighting could be improved on 17th Street. Make it more safe for the public and for visitors.
Hey, Dave, did everybody see the SEPTED analysis of the area? And for those who don't know what SEPTED is, crime prevention through environmental design. I know we had, and I apologize, I haven't looked at it in a long time. I looked at it when we first got it done. That whole analysis is doing exactly what you guys are talking about. It's about lighting and how you build streets and parking lots and buildings themselves to make them where they don't have, like, let's just be honest, there's a whole bunch of hidey holes here. You can go down to Cooper Street and go around the back there in the alley. You have a lot of criminal behavior that happens back there. You also have the dead end of 17th Street, which, because it's hard for to go through, you don't have, it's difficult. Law enforcement literally has to go around and go in the street, go all the way to the end, and then you got to try to go all the way back. Well, actually, that's not true. You can cut through parking lots and pop back out through, but you catch my drift. There's a whole lot of areas back there for people to hide, and they're not seen. SEPTED looks at all that, including how the street flows and everything goes. So I don't know if that would answer a lot of these questions or not, or how good that analysis was done, but I do know we did it and it was available.
Yep, and we have incorporated that. I think that is going to come out through the implementation of this plan. We'll be able to honor that system in the analysis that they've done. I don't see any problems with anything that they've had in that, and I think from what I'm hearing, the recommendation is just to take a look at those projects and take a look at the redesign opportunities from the east to the west, even down towards the river, where they certainly took some photographs of things, that places where it was pretty easy to hide, certainly in the summer months. So I think moving on from here, the recommendation is probably to just honor that analysis and move forward with those projects. Let's keep moving on and get a little bit deeper into this. Into our polling here and get our poll number 2. So this is about connectivity and mobility, which it came up as a topic or as an issue that we could potentially address here. So we have a couple of questions. The first one is it really has to do a little bit more with connectivity, access, mobility, looking at our 3 main corridors here. So think about these three corridors and what interest or ideas or projects you may have, and help us really find out answer that where question. And so for the first one is 17th. For 17th, what would the top 3, pick 3 connectivity and mobility priorities be? And this is, again, I understand the chicken and egg thing, but this is still very helpful for us to take some ideas to the next level when we can answer that where are things intended to be addressed. So we have number 1 is 17th. So you could look at the options of picking your top 3, select multiple choice there. 2 is Americana. 3 is obviously Shoreline. And if there's any others, then please provide discussion after we close this poll. So go ahead and click your 3 and then push submit at the bottom after you've chosen on all 3 questions.
I had a question. It says provide secondary public access to Americana near 7th Street cul-de-sac. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, that's I'll zoom in just a little bit here, and this is something that's come up a number of times, but it's somehow making access and connections here by the powerhouse and getting that connectivity a little bit stronger pedestrian wise. If anybody has any ideas on how that happens or what the hangups might be, this is a chance to talk about there and share those ideas.
Captain Birch, this is Zach. So the other opportunity was a public right-of-way connecting Americana to 17th Street, kind of how the parking lot connections work now, but more of a public right-of-way.
So this is a subject of previous planning efforts. Yeah, thanks, Zach, for clarifying that. That's certainly been in a number of plans that the city has.
That's why the Americana question, it's only allowing me to choose 1 instead of 3.
I'm having that same problem, Megan.
I'm not sure why. Might have been a setting.
The poll, the poll settings just wanted you to be aware of that. So when you see the results and don't see as many responses, maybe you can calibrate why.
Right, thank you. Yeah, apologies for that. I wonder if we can change that quickly. Let's give it another couple minutes. Looks like votes are coming in. And again, these options really came from our first stakeholder sessions. You know, we heard a lot of folks talking about the issues, and so we're trying to translate some of those voices into solutions, and then trying to put those solutions on the map at a certain point to spur reinvestment. So everything helps here. Every discussion, every topic, every comment is really helpful as we come to our third meeting, where we'll actually have some ideas of where things might end up laying out on the ground.
Dave, you muted yourself.
Thank you, sorry. All right, so sharing results, and for 17th Street, select your top one, apologies, connectivity or mobility priority. So completing the sidewalk network at the previous session we had presented, where ACHD and others have recognized that that's on the list of them for priority to complete that network. So that's the number one choice here, followed by remove restricting or regulating on-street parking, and then on-street bicycle facilities. So we all know that the sidewalk network is important. I'm sorry, my results are coming in a little funny. So everybody, 19 out of 19 people who polled agreed that improving the streetscape to current standards, lighting, street furnishings, potentially storm drain improvements is the highest priority. Certainly for 17th Street, that makes sense. I don't know if there's any additional commentary on that and why that is.
I answered the other. I might be the only one, but we do have to cross private property to get anywhere. So either cross onto OEC's property or wholesale forest. So going back to that first meeting, we talked about maybe vacating the alley too. I think ACHD said they would consider that. And that seems like one of the low-hanging fruit as far as a budget expenditure goes. So if that's the case, then I don't know if we need connectivity all the way down 17th Street.
So vacating the alley, this particular alley?
Yeah, in between Cali, I don't know if I pronounced it right, Caliente Salon and Wholesale Forest. It dead ends essentially in the parking lot of OEC, and then it actually it goes through OEC's property and then takes the left turn onto Americana. Mm-hmm. And so people who are going to 17th Street, they end up trespassing across the parking lot.
So having that additional cut through access point would alleviate some of that issue.
Removing access point is what I'm thinking.
All right, so vacating it completely, and that having no access at all through between 17th and Americana, or is there a different place that's better for a cut through between 17th and Americana.
Yeah, I just want to, I guess, bring it up for discussion. I don't know what Paul thinks about it.
Yeah, sorry, somebody have comment?
I was going to say the only problem with eliminating it is that it's already such a tucked in place, you know, and there's a lot of little holes that people could go in there. I mean, the business folks in there are not our problem. It's all the others that go in there, and the more you restrict it, the harder it is for us to drive through and get eyeballs on it. So, I mean, I understand why you would want to restrict it. I think, though, it might be counterintuitive. I would think that the traffic flowing through there would, I think, honestly, bring more visibility. Sure, certainly make it easier for LE to go in there and take a look and to deal with what's going on.
Thank you.
Yeah, and certainly thinking about why that is in the planning efforts from the city standpoint. We've got some city folks here, so if anybody has any other ideas or commentary, please share. But really, this whatever the heritage or history of the plat, the city plat in this area, as the city grew, left it with that urban kind of downtown traditional grid that blended into weird, kind of awkwardly shaped parcels. And I think at least part of the idea is that we can reinforce the urban grid and make developable parcels here in this particular area. Zach or anybody can build on that as needed, but really without having any other outlet through the connector here in the future, that's the impetus for having something go through there. So streetscaping, getting it to the standards really, and that's the standards of the Downtown Streetscape Standards Manual that CCDC, ACHD, and others have worked on. We can't seem to find a place in this particular area where it meets the standards, and of course this happens over time and incrementally, and so that clearly is the of the highest priority or interest of the present group. So connectivity to the greenbelt, particularly on Shoreline, that makes some sense there as to why that would be an option or an improvement. So let's keep moving on and go to our third poll as we poll 3 is about utilities. So we got a couple questions. There are 1, 2, 3 questions here. Similar framework. If you can think about each of these streets and corridors, what would be the top priority for utilities? That would really, again, back to our whole goal here, which is to spur reinvestment in these areas. So go ahead. I think these are designed to be just a top pick. So pick your 3 and submit.
It's only letting me pick one.
Yeah, sorry, pick 1 for all 3. I just apologize, said that wrong.
And this is for what's best to make this project go, or like for safety? I think this is just what we think is best to make it go, correct?
So the stakeholder group that we have obviously have various interests. I would say based on your role as a stakeholder, whether that's a private project or health, safety, wellness, whatever it may be that your interest is as a stakeholder would be how I would vote. just about everybody in. A couple more seconds. Okay. And the polling now, share results. So this is really helpful for us to connect some of these choices to why, and then obviously the where is starting to get a picture painted here. So for 17th Street, the top utility priority street lighting, installing or improving it, which is already brought up. And am I correct in saying, again, that that's for safety improvements? Is that correct? Okay. Stormwater, as Zach mentioned earlier, that's the one that really probably overall has the, depending on how you look at it, the biggest need, depending on where you're at. So that doesn't seem like it's for Americana, and then got a couple votes for Shoreline. But otherwise, street lighting is the clear priority here. So that definitely cements that as far as a project or priority or effort goes, obviously, for all three of our corridors here. No, there was no others selected, but kind of curious, did we manage to get all the options there? Is there any other utility infrastructure, anything else that wasn't on these choices that is of interest to folks in the line? All right, we'll go to very clear picture there then. Any other thoughts on utilities or infrastructure before we move on?
Hey, Dave, Rob Bosefield. Just wondering, I'm trying to remember, is there any like power line undergrounding that might be a viable candidate in this area?
Yeah, I believe that is a piece that I could probably pull up the map here. But there are a number of overhead power lines, and I don't recall if anybody from Idaho Power is on the line, but please speak up before me.
Yeah, Megan Ronk from Idaho Power is here.
So Megan, is it the policy of Idaho Power to over time underground the overhead power lines in this area?
I don't have a definitive answer to that question right now in terms of our future plans in this particular area for undergrounding, but I could take that as a follow-up item.
Hey Megan, this is Andrew. I can maybe comment a little bit.
Great.
So I'm pulling up our internal GIS here. We have a lot of overhead power lines, but because the substation's there, you have transmission lines, which are higher voltage, and it's a major hub to get power from a higher voltage to a lower voltage out of the substation as a feeder, which are like the smaller distribution lines that you see. Idaho Power does have underground distribution lines, but as far as transmission lines go, we don't underground transmission lines for a variety of reasons: cost, safety, maintenance, things like that. So it is quite an undertaking to underground something like that. So that's kind of Idaho Power's stance on, or at least not stance, but our kind of where we're at for undergrounding any of our overhead stuff.
Thank you. That's great info. I appreciate that. Has Idaho Power, for those transmission lines, partnered with owners to share costs and something like that for the big transmission lines?
Typically, no. If it's developer driven, we move lines at the cost of the development. Because we are governed by the PUC and ratepayers, we can't pass on unreasonable costs to regular ratepayers throughout our service territory for something that's not like holistically beneficial to the whole service-wide territory.
Thanks. Makes a lot of sense. Rob, I believe you asked that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mainly raised it, Dave, just to see if there's, I don't know if that wasn't on the list. I don't know if that's a priority or of interest for the other landowners in the area.
It's a great question. For anyone on the phone, is that a priority or of interest? As you can see, really, this is just a great opportunity for us to get all these things out there and think about how, how do we prioritize not only the timing of something like this, should undergrounding be a thing, or for private owner or anyone else, where is the first, the closer that I think we can understand where the places are that might develop is going to make, I think, everything more clear for all the folks on the phone and just involved in this project and involved in reinvestment in this area. So, but thanks Rob for bringing that up. It's a very good one to keep in mind. Okay, let's go to our fourth poll, which is a little bit more nuanced, and please feel free to ask questions as I launch this. It's about land use and zoning in the land use framework and the regulatory framework. So there's a number of questions here, and I think this should spur some discussion. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, a whole bunch of questions. Some of them are choose one, and some of the 3 options, and some are choose your top 3 multiple choice, and hopefully that setting is set correctly. Yeah, the last one is select your top 3. So if there's any problems, let us know, and we'll try to adjust. So go ahead and click play. Any issues so far, anybody?
For the ignorant, can you explain floor area ratio?
Yes. So floor area ratio was brought up in our previous meetings as the limiting factor of the C, one of the C zones. So across the highway here, I believe for one of the projects that have occurred, a zoning change from the C3 to the C5 was enabled a development to achieve a higher floor area ratio, which is the ratio of building square footage on a site to the actual site square footage. So that means it's, if you have a 1.0 FAR, I might mess this up, so I apologize. That means you can cover 100% of the site because your floor area is the same as the site area. If you have a 3.0, you can do 3 times that. So you could do site times 3. Does that make sense? And
it does, thank you.
And the reason that was a factor was because it wasn't necessarily the height of the building allowed by zoning. That was a limiting factor or a less desirable feature of the land use regulations. It was the configuration of where you could put building on the site. Because some of these sites are very large, so even a very tight FAR could change the way that you could do things on that site.
Hey, Dave.
Yes.
A few of these questions reference the next map in your slide.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, apologize. So there are some of those. You'll see blocks A, B, and C. So we have. I'll lead in a little bit about what this is and why it's beneficial for us. But A is fairly self-explanatory here. Again, this is just trying to help everyone understand where the priorities for certain improvements might exist while still having it, fairly anonymous and not having to single out any particular properties here. So A is fairly evident because it is just city and ACHD and publicly owned property. So that lends itself to being a certain, having a certain line drawn in the sand, so to speak. B is a little bit where it is because some of the eras of development for some of these buildings are similar. It's also very, lots of surface parking and one story kind of characteristic of these sites are fairly similar. And then C, this is where the old urban grid of the 300 or 600 foot by 300 foot blocks is transitioned in sort of that line between those smaller lots. And those bigger lots is right about there. This is also where the idea of a festival streetscape based on the city and ACHD's and CCDC streetscape manual that we've discussed already today. So it's kind of curious as to what folks think, but that's where that would be. And maybe even eventually, as in the Shoreline plan, reinforce that urban grid further down the rest of Shoreline district. That was what was discussed and publicly kind of designed in the public eye as let's sort of make this a new way to improve access and mobility through our site and make it more of that downtown urban neighborhood. So when you see the questions about A, B, and C, that's what we're referring to. Let's give a couple more seconds here. We're getting some votes in now.
Hey, Dave, quick question on question number 7. It says, which of the following neighborhood characteristics are important to you? Is that specific to the entire project area or just your initial feelings of what makes up a neighborhood?
That's to our study area. Obviously a neighborhood doesn't end where the study area ends. So I will say, think about it a little bit more holistically than just where that dotted line ends, actually. So, because people are moving through this place, where they're going to and coming from affects what happens here. If you're familiar with the River Street Master Plan area, that might be more of the neighborhood. But I would say think of it as the neighborhood here and the people that are coming to work there, or there's nobody really living there except for in I think the Riverwalk apartments here, but the neighborhood as it serves the rest of the downtown area as well.
Okay, thank you.
And that comes from, no problem. That comes from a little bit of a discussion we had about the River Street Master Plan does consider this in its long-term vision as a neighborhood with mix of housing and jobs. And this is in some way giving us an idea of what is that confirming that or not. And hopefully we can talk to that here in a second too. Let's do a couple more seconds on this one. Okay, still missing a couple folks, so just get your votes in and we'll share the results here. All right, closing the poll and we'll share. This is going to be quite interesting. All right. So it's probably very evident where these questions came from, and this helps us confirm or deny or discuss what this means. So number one, would you be in favor of changes to the zoning which would allow for an increase in height if height is the limiting factor or distracting factor for reinvestment? Clearly, yes was the clear result. Anybody who said no, is there any particular thoughts behind that and from the group, or not sure?
I said not sure because quite frankly, I didn't have enough information on it to know what exactly all that means and the impacts. Quite frankly, there's probably a whole lot of history and probably bear traps that are in that for, I'm sure, between the city and between the private investors. So I very tactically just said not sure.
Yes, yeah, valid, very valid. And I think, yeah, I believe that then another way to look at it would be really to what height would you be changing it to, right? There's a certain amount of, it's not necessarily saying we want unlimited downtown zoning here, so that's could be clarified. Just as the impetus of that question was that C5 zone. Didn't want to overcomplicate the question, so because we do have an opportunity to discuss it as we are, but really it's that if there was targeted or and zoning has to change on a case-by-case basis, but if there was a C3 to C5 change, is that beneficial? And can anybody speak to that? Anybody else?
I was just going to say the reason I voted no is just because I didn't know the height regulations, number one, but just from the way the I-84 corridor comes in there and to have large, tall buildings, there, I don't know if that's a good appearance or a bad appearance when you're entering the city and you're seeing taller buildings there. Maybe it doesn't hinder anything, but it might be. It was just something I thought about.
Yeah.
And I think from my perspective, I just felt like there wasn't enough information to answer it in a really transparent manner, because as Rick is pointing out, and I don't know who was speaking before, but so much would depend on the height and what we're looking at. I'm in favor of change that would make some of the development easier, but to what degree, it just wasn't clear enough for me to answer.
Yeah, of course. And so what questions would you ask about it right now then? Is it more of the where and the how high?
Yeah. How high are we talking about, and exactly where, and does it impact as you're coming in off the freeway? All of those things.
Yeah, so Dave, I answered I answered it for increased height, but I took it kind of in a total of all these questions, because I don't really care if everyone hears it. I put mixed use, because my vision of mixed use is a combination, obviously, of all kinds of stuff, which would then dictate height. So I think I'm kind of saying a little bit what Shirley was asking, is that as you kind of develop your plan, some buildings may be taller, other ones shorter, as you kind of build the different uses that you're going to be. So I'm for more height where it makes sense. So I put it in there, but where it makes sense based on what the overall plan is.
No, it's fantastic. That's exactly what we need to get out of this. And it's not as a plan or a reinvestment study, that's not saying that height minimums are going to go away. Obviously, it's in the context of what uses might occur there. The lens that we're looking at here is really trying to say what are those things that we heard. The height was one of those factors that is preventing reinvestment. So let's talk about what that is and where that is. So I appreciate the comments. And I will say when the West Downtown Neighborhood Plan, which comes to right about, let's see, I think the West Downtown neighborhood's right about there, something like that. The urbanism and the urban form and physical planning that was done there basically said anything next to the interstate could be a better place for higher and taller buildings as a transitional piece as you get into the older, more mature neighborhoods of West Downtown, right? So testing that theory here, is that also something that you all on the line feel is applicable as an urban design principle? As we transition into, we have the same issue here where we're smaller scale, things are happening across Americana, even though we have a boundary line there for our study area, it still means we have to think about how things go from one place to another. Again, this is a reinvestment study. It's not necessarily a master plan, but these comments are all useful and valid. I would say, as far as a takeaway from what I'm hearing right now, zoning height and density and these things should be discussed on a case-by-case basis based on the use and form of the buildings or activities or uses that are coming in. So clear yeses in favor of maybe having flexibility within the zoning, but not across the board on a case-by-case basis is what I'm hearing.
Hey, Dave, I selected, oh, sorry, Shirley.
No, I really liked what Mark had said. I mean, I too am for mixed use design, and I think if we're talking about height that makes sense, then I'm for it. But just as carte blanche, big brush strokes.
Yep. No, completely makes sense, and then the whole hope is to talk about it. So that's great.
Hey Dave, this is Wayne. I look at that area you just drew on the map. Right across it, we have the new St. Luke's building with a parking garage, a new apartment complex. I think copying that height into the area you drew would be totally appropriate, right? You probably don't put a 14-story building, but matching what's being done just right on the other side of the connector would seem very appropriate for me. I mean, our buildings, closer, I mean, we're off, we're on the corner of Shoreline, but we're 3 stories. Having 6 stories between me and the freeway, I think would be completely appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Yep, no, thank you. So I think this might line up. So here's a zoning map. And if I line this up a little bit better, it's not letting me. So that whole area is C3D, which I believe is design review. So C5 is across, and that's kind of where this came from. Is that a reasonable zone to consider? I will also preface this, and Zach can certainly speak to it as well, is that this is the questions that we're asking here. Apologies, I stopped sharing. Are really for CCDC and the community's benefit, but it doesn't exactly fit into what CCDC does, obviously. So it's really, this is our chance to discuss it as a group and to allow our partner agencies to think about these things, right? So CCDC can participate in a number of programs. It can't do zone changes. So just keep that in mind. Is really, this is just for our benefit to think and make sure that we're collaborative and thinking about what might happen out here. Is that right, Zach? That's kind of the.
Yeah, you spoke very clearly on that. Yeah, there's a lot of elements of the study where CCDC really can't address the solutions ourselves, but we can partner in whatever way we can with the city or ACHD or whoever to try to accomplish those goals, but it's most important right now just to figure out what those objectives are.
Thanks, Mark, for coming. Keep in touch. A couple of the land use, future land uses. So how does this area end up transitioning? Now, of course, Blueprint Boise and other things, River Street Neighborhood Master Plan does think about this a little bit. And as I mentioned, that question number 7 was a little bit about how do you feel about what those master plans say, which is a urban mixed use neighborhood with a certain amount of density that might not be there right now. So we wanted to ask directly, what would the future uses in your mind be? So mixed use, that makes a heck of a lot of sense why people would pick that one the most. Existing characters, light industrial, light manufacturing, and some office and personal services. So I think there's a little bit of a message here saying that, saying to whoever may be interested in hearing it, more mixed use and more active uses eventually over time. Food and beverage also is in there, which makes sense. We're talking, as Zach mentioned, this is a place that people go through. In order to make it a place that people go to, food and beverage is at least an easy daytime and at least in some cases 18-hour activity that would be nice in a mixed use building perhaps. So I think it's a pretty clear message on there for Block A. There's some there's some idea of when we spoke last time at the stakeholder meeting, the idea of whatever happens with these properties, the idea that it's potential for it to be housing or affordable housing or workforce housing. If that was the choice, up to 24 dwelling units an acre is pretty dense, pretty downtown, but 24 plus is truly, I think, that downtown density that for Block A, that did get a couple of votes there. For Block B, and it's kind of interested to see if there's many differences here, but it looks like pretty similar pattern. Really, the reason we broke these up into blocks is there a better or different vision for these uses in one than the other? So far, fairly consistent, I think, across the board here. Does anyone on the phone have any ideas or thoughts about, since we have consistent votes, about A, B, or C, or what could be the vision for what happens there in the future? If I focus specifically on housing, is there a better A, B, or C for housing for your purposes or interests?
Well, just representing the homeless community, it obviously is something that's an issue that needs to be dealt with. And, we don't know what's going to happen with Interfaith Sanctuary. We, may not be in that area at some point. But the fact of the matter is it is a place that people that are in this community identify with. And my thought as I voted was if we could have some kind of concentration of affordable housing or let's get these folks housed appropriately, and then that drives the opportunity to have the neighborhood amenities or the other possibilities in this area. I didn't particularly have A, B, or C in my mind necessarily, but that was my thinking. If we can do something appropriately to help folks in that area to have a place that works better than what's working maybe now. That would be maybe an option to get the rest of the other choices moving, where folks are willing to invest and not just be afraid that, hey, why am I investing in this area there where I'm going to have this issue with the homeless community? So,
yep.
I'll speak up. I thought Block A looked the best for housing. And I think it goes back to when I used to play SimCity, and you want to put your housing by the river. So that's, I think we need housing so badly that that's just how I thought of it. No real good reason, but yeah. There you go.
No, yeah, I know. I understand that. It's any supply helps. And we, as we mentioned earlier, as our finding from the previous session, any supply will helps housing supply across the pretty much across the board. In this area, as was mentioned just now, is identified with that. That makes sense, logical.
Surely, yeah, I agree with you. This is Tom Rebholz. I like the housing there too, as it's closer to the grade school across Fairview Avenue. So I think it's an easier, safer walk if people are walking to school.
This George Iliff, I agree that A is the best as well. I mean, they're not making any more river frontage. And also the properties are owned by municipal agencies, or state agencies. So it would seem to be, in spite of the red tape, you're not talking about a number of private ownerships, but several public that could be combined for an amazing multifamily area there.
And any thoughts towards the scale or the urbanism of A? I think we're all correct on that river frontage. It's pretty valuable, pretty prime. Is it the more the merrier, or is there in anybody's eyes a limit to how much, what happens?
Well, doesn't a lot of it depend on how you develop the rest of the area around it? I mean, what makes sense to me? It's like having an overall sort of guiding principle or plan, and then deciding how much.
Yep, and that's what is important when this, back to the zoning map again. When somebody is making a case, whether it's a nonprofit or developer, whoever, to put housing there, that's exactly the kind of evidence that they need to provide to make that zone change from the A1 to whatever it may be. So I think this plan and study can help with the comments that we're receiving, can help maybe provide a little bit of a basis for what that case is. So, but it will need a zone change for anything to happen there, and obviously, affordable housing projects take years. Regular housing projects take a long time. So a lot of things need to happen, but appreciate
I haven't talked much about the south side of the river because it's on the other, not really in our zone, but we know that's a major encampment area for main homeless folks. Now, the north side, affordable housing there, or whatever we can do to provide some kind of housing helps eliminate maybe some of that. But the south side is definitely in a our police officer could tell us that, but the south side there is definitely a problem area. And if we can do some things there to rezone or create some residential or housing opportunities, it may help. I'm not saying it's going to eliminate, but it may help some of that situation that's being caused down there. Well, that space is just is nothing, and so people just want to hang out.
Yep.
Yeah, and this is Captain Birch. When I looked at the A, it was funny because I was thinking some of the same things that the group is talking about. I guess the north or the east side of Shoreline in A, if I really wrestled, I think I did say mixed use in there, and I thought maybe residential. The other place where honestly I thought residential, and it's only because I think I was kind of guided by some of the previous conversations. I know they looked at doing some development over in the sanctuary right in that area so that they are close to downtown. It's got good access. So I was kind of torn between the two for residential because I do think C is an area that you could definitely put something like that in there as well.
Yeah, I would agree, and certainly with the services that could provide, it does sound like we are getting some thoughts about A or C. Not that it can't happen in B. Thinking like a developer, however you can make it financially feasible is where it's going to happen. But certainly, there's no reason why B couldn't be feasible over time. So those are all the things that we want to think about with this study. But with the public ownership aspect, as mentioned, certainly has a little bit more of a possibility with A. Let me bring my poll back up real quick. Lost it somewhere. Okay. As far as neighborhood character and changing neighborhood character or compatibility with our ideas and what the conventional wisdom says in the long-range plans for the city, neighborhood characteristics that are most important to folks, those looks like those day-to-day amenities, those 18-hour amenities are the things that would be important. And really, again, chicken and egg. I think these are all things that are potential to happen once you get housing or rooftops in. Really, it's always a tough thing to plan as planners and designers for one thing when a number of other things have to happen first. But I think this at least confirms to us, and I think the long range planning that's currently adopted, that is consistent with the character that we're seeing here and that we want to see in the future. Anybody who said other for 7 have any ideas? All right. Question 8, top 3 incentive priorities. So this is a very interesting one. So these came again from our previous discussions. And if you look through the list, tax credits could mean a number of things, but that was one that was mentioned specifically for properties that were across the interstate that had secured tax credits to do development, and that helped reinvest in that area. Zoning or density bonuses or in lieu payments for open space for affordable housing. That's again kind of confirms some of our initial ideas that housing could be a service or a product provided here in our 17th Street study area. Let's see. Nobody said other, but it really just says, this just kind of says to us, anything to get us one step closer to developing, with the emphasis on cost sharing for infrastructure and any kind of bonuses to make a project more feasible. And certainly we heard that the first time as well, as anything that you know, there's a couple projects that are really just about ready to go or possible, and anything to help it get out of the ground. And then once one thing gets out of the ground here, it could really get things moving. Anyone want to speak to any of these incentives or have any specific examples?
I think Shirley hit on it. I think housing is a big issue. And I think that, especially in the city, I know that's something that we've committed to. I think anything you could do to work on affordable housing, I think is going to help definitely generate interest. And I think the city would be interested in.
All right, thanks. I think we've got one more poll to finish up on, which is on a similar topic, but a little bit different. And it's about placemaking. So we've got just a couple more questions here. And this really gets to a little bit more than land use and again, more of those things that private owners and other agencies and everybody else can be a partner on, that maybe CCDC can possibly be a partner on, but it's really more about what is this place going to be and how can that help us reinvest? If there is a chicken or an egg that comes first, in your eyes, what amenities would most benefit A, B, and C here? So Festival Street, that's also Festival Streetscaping. So that's something of interest.
Can you please explain Festival Street a little bit better, please?
I can. And Zach, also, if we have maybe a street section, that would be helpful too.
Might be easiest just to give an example. Yeah. So the Basque Block is kind of a festival street. 8th Street from Main to Bannock is somewhat of a festival street, even though there aren't a whole lot of festivals happening right now.
Some of the infrastructure required is the retractable bollards, soft rolled curbs, wider pedestrian zone, shade trees, street trees, and green stormwater infrastructure, silva cells, those kinds of things. Looks like we got just about everybody in. I think our team's really curious on this one as to when you choose two of these or one of these, what in your mind is the improvement or amenity helping with? And if there's specific examples, where would a public restroom need to be located? So almost done. Go ahead and close out the poll and share with you all. So this is very interesting. All right, so what would most benefit Block A? Urban Plaza and open park space. So clearly that is the nature of that site with the green belt being there. So if I'm reading this, it's to either maintain that use or to improve it in that area. So is that the, I guess if we just talked about housing being there, so is the idea that if housing goes there, we need to maintain open space, park space, and program it with some park recreation facilities?
That was my intent.
So if you're looking at the site, be basically minimally invasive to the green belt. Looks like restrooms got a couple votes. Is there a particular, is there a need that's not being met there for those who voted for that? Is it just greenbelt users? It's nice to have a facility.
The city of Boise's just built new restrooms in Block A. Right behind the firefighter memorial, there was an old set there that had been closed for a while. They've torn them down and just put in brand new ones. They're not open yet, but they'll be open in the next week or two.
Yeah, is my understanding. None of these, anybody who said none, or if there's something else on here that's not there. Any comments? Let's just see if there's any differences between these. So Park Space for B did not get any votes. Festival Street, I think that applies pretty strongly there. Urban Plaza received a number of votes. And then in C, so a little bit of variation between these, which is kind of interesting. Historical, culturally significant amenities. I imagine that reflects on the just the general nature of the powerhouse being there and everything. Is that kind of where that was directed? Any thoughts on what those amenities might look like?
Well, there's also the River Street area, and that culturally, which I know it's not, I mean, it's sort of in there, but culturally, it was a red line district. There's just some cultural significance to some of that area.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I picked the Urban Plaza just because I know there's a number of businesses there already. So maybe it would be an easier sell for some of those folks to create more of that urban space there, as opposed to trying to reinvest something as a festival street. But
right. I could see some opportunities in C where that might benefit, just a place for people to even just to sit down and whether it's on the sidewalk or streetscape or otherwise, place for respite, place to just, if you're going to a business there, to just hang out and be not on your feet for a second would be valuable.
we're talking about C. I'm the one that picked the other, and the other choice there might be, earlier in the survey, you talked about a bicycle substation or a bicycle, I don't know what you'd call it exactly, but I think there are opportunities in area C where there could be a lot of, there could be a good opportunity for a bike station or something for bikers as they transition from downtown to maybe that, the Americana area.
No, yeah, valuable point as people get from here, and certainly bikeway and bike network improvements are on a lot of people's radar for this area, particularly for Americana was mentioned specifically, and as you go from up here to the Greenbelt, which I believe there is a nice network of bike stations, so it makes a lot of sense.
At one point, when the stadium's being talked about, I think the transitioning from parking downtown further in and then walking or having to bike out to the stadium, that would have been a more viable then, but without the stadium. But I still think it would be a good option in area C.
No, I appreciate that. You speak of parking too, and it hasn't really come up much as opportunities for a garage. Obviously, it's again chicken and egg here, but since it hasn't come up, is there any thoughts on parking amongst the group here? Is that an amenity or a particular need that's not being met?
This is Andy Erstead. A couple things keep popping up in my mind as I've been listening, and Shirley pointed out that housing is, we're chronically low on housing, and housing and parking coexist, or they kind of need each other. Despite everyone's efforts to try and get people out of cars, people still have cars. They may be getting smaller, but I think housing and cars are one thing we have to think about. The other question that I want people to be thinking about is, we talk about affordable housing, and there's about 15 ways to identify affordable housing. Are we doing affordable housing for the chronically homeless like New Path, which is very expensive to build and maintain, but it gets the chronically homeless into a housing model that housing first and then moves forward? Or are we looking at a mix of, I call it income limited, low income, bond funded. And when you start to talk about that, you start to think, well, you're not going to necessarily build podium parking, cars underneath and structure up above, as is in the current zone A. So, you know, giving this whole planning area the greatest amount of flexibility is going to allow developers and owners in the city to inspire different models for housing and different models for planning and different models for integration. And you know, diversity, I think, is one of the things we want to strive for in this area. It already is pretty diverse if you think about it from just from the standpoint of the shelters and the non-shelter functions, the sort of the overflow issues that are created. So I think, Dave, your question, we didn't really talk a whole lot about parking, is we're going to need parking. And we just have to figure out how to make parking work with housing and what is our goal in housing. Is it, you know, is it affordable? Is it a mix? Is it housing for chronically homeless or whatever? So you know, again, giving them the C5 zone, I think everyone consistently said greater use of mix and greater density is going to give the planners their opportunities to, and the developers their opportunities to understand what's affordable for them in the long run.
Yep. No, thank you, Andrew. And certainly some of these questions do seem kind of preemptive. Obviously, but that's planning. You know, we got to try our best to get it right. Ask the questions, record the input, and get as close as we can to a shared vision for what's happening here. And again, with the caveat of CCDC is only participating in certain types of programs, but certainly this is all very, very helpful. I think we are at our time. We strongly encourage you to get in touch with us on any other input, and provide us via email. You can email Zach, myself, Chris Dwyer, Angela Hansen's also the project manager from CT. Give us all the information that you can. Really, now is the time that we can turn this into plans and maps and prioritize projects. So thanks everybody for coming. Zach, any other closing thoughts? If I'm missing anything?
No, I just want to say thanks, and I appreciate everybody spending their time this afternoon with us. So thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Appreciate you all. And if you have anything else to say, just email us. So
thank you.